God has a plan for your life, guys, but He needs you to start walking in the direction of your dreams. Otherwise, how can He help you? You know, this is something that I wish that I learned a lot earlier. I spent the majority of my life really not understanding what God's plan for my life was, what God's or what my even purpose was, um, is really difficult, and it sucks. It really does suck, especially when, the people around you are doing so well and you literally have no idea what you're doing with your life and what the reason you're here is for. Um, and I know that how that feels mentally and how draining it is. Um, and especially what I used to find was I was so um, I was always asking God, like, God, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Just tell me what you want me to do, and I'll run at it. I'll run at it, And the reality is, I kind of I wanted to do everything, and in doing everything, I did nothing. I had like option paralysis, where I was just getting swayed, and I was just drifting. I was drifting through life, like not really having a direction. I was just letting the current of life take me where I was going. I wasn't heading in any direction, or at least I wasn't choosing a direction. Um, and I really struggled with that for a long, long time. And I I've come to realize that God can't really do anything in your life if you're not even going in a direction. You've got to at least aim for something, and start walking. And then with momentum, that's when things actually start happening. That's when God can actually do something with your life. And I can just use myself as an example. Like, I've wanted to do and use this YouTube channel for years. I started it probably like 2 or 3 years ago, where I was making sort of like short form content. My accent is coming out there. I was using short form content from sort of like podcasts I was listening to, and I was clipping them up and then just chucking them on my YouTube channel. And I managed to gain like 2,500 subscribers from that because one of the videos kind of blew up. And I always wanted to do this, where I was actually like speaking to you and offering the sort of wisdom and knowledge that I've gained. I'm not saying I know a lot, but I know something. And it was just always just lingering in my mind. But how was God ever gonna be able to do anything in my life for me to achieve that dream if I wasn't even uploading videos? Like, I have to make that steps, and it's the same with anything. Like, whatever it is that you want to do, you have to make that first step. You have to take some action before God can do anything. And it's with that action that's when momentum builds, and things start falling into place. And the initial plan that you might have, over time, God can then reveal His true plan to you by giving you different circumstances, different opportunities that may arise. Things may happen, and then you pivot. But you can't do that if you're doing nothing. And mate, like, I wish I could go back in time and just slap myself and just be like, just do something. I don't care what it is. Um, I wish I was doing this like years ago, and I wanted to. I really wanted to, but I just didn't have the courage. And to be honest, it's probably a good thing, because I've learned a lot in the past year or two that it's definitely changed my perspective on things. And maybe that was God's will. Maybe that was God's will, that I didn't start doing all this until the right time. And maybe it's still not the right time, and maybe I'm still chatting a load of rubbish, but who knows? Um, but yeah, like, it's true, man. Like, it's one thing always constantly asking God, what am I supposed to do? Like, I spent the majority of my life really pretty depressed about it, to be honest with you, because the people around me were flourishing. Like my friends, family were, getting themselves together and like progressing through life, and I just felt like I was just stagnant. But the reality was, I wasn't actually doing anything. I wasn't helping myself. I wasn't, doing the work first. And it's all about taking that first step. You've got to make those initial steps, and then God can guide you. But if you're stood still, say if you've got somebody who's blind next to you, how can you guide them if they're not even moving? Like you're just gonna be trying to move a brick wall. Like you're just gonna be stood there like, I ain't going anywhere. But if they're already moving, then you can start to guide and steer them. And it's the same with God. We've just got to start. You may look back and think, wow, like, I can't believe I was even doing that at the start. Look at where I am now. But you don't get to that stage unless you actually make that leap. And it's all about the leap of faith, isn't it? Taking that initial first step is scary, man. Look at it. I can't remember if it was Peter or Simon who takes that first step on the water as he's walking towards Jesus, who stood on the water. That first step, you would have been shaking, mate. You would have been shaking, especially in that storm. You would not be having it. Not having it. But the whole point of that story is he kept his eyes on Jesus. And when his eyes wandered, that's when he sank. So if we just keep our eyes focused on Jesus and we just start moving and taking those steps, we can walk on water, guys. We can walk on water, and who knows what we can achieve, with God's behind us. What's impossible with man is possible with God. So there's no dream too big for anybody, all right? And I really want to say this was a message that I wish I had heard many years ago. So I hope that helps, guys. I'll see you on the next one. See you later.